Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be talking about a few different things on OCD, an assortment of different things that I get asked a lot. So one thing I'm going to cover is things that do and don't work for OCD, that we think work and we go towards, but it's one of the first things that we often all think of, but it doesn't work quite like that. So one of the first things is hypnotism. People often go towards OCD for treatment with hypnotism for OCD. Now, I'm not an expert on hypnotism, and I know it can be very helpful for many things. But in regards to chronic, pretty severe OCD, I'm not so sure. I'm not. I haven't seen any great results from that. I've never seen cases of sort of severe OCD treated by hypnotism. Um, but what I was. We've all been in this situation before. Is that when I was younger and I first got OCD, I thought to myself, "Oh, I wonder if I can go to a hypnotist who can just hypnotize me to forget that particular thought. Then I'll be fine." And it doesn't exactly work like that. That's not the case. That's not how these things go. Because obviously, if you could forget one thing, then it would certainly go after more and more things, and it would just keep morphing. So that wouldn't fix it. So in regards to hypnotism for treating chronic severe OCD, never seen anyone recover like that from that. But it's something that a lot of people often think about. Another thing is deep brain stimulation and surgery for OCD. I've never seen a case ever that warrants that. I've seen cases of people that I treat and am treating, and people that I'm working with that have gone for that and had that, and then were very disheartened when it didn't work. And it doesn't. It's not for chronic severe OCD. I've never ever seen a case of anyone recovering that way. And what's always sad is when those people then start with me, they very quickly realise, they can see that their irrational beliefs were fueling the anxiety. And once we get under that, very quickly do they start to see things moving. And it's sad that many people get to that situation. It's very easy to think that you might need that, because when OCD is chronic and you haven't got under it and it's just going on and on all the time, you feel like nothing's getting you better, that you might as well try higher and higher risks at things to try and get better. And unfortunately, that's not the case. That doesn't warrant considering. I've never, no matter how desperate you are, don't go looking for deep brain stimulation or surgery for OCD. I highly do not recommend that. Other things that I do not suggest for OCD: you will not be able to go on, no matter how intensive the course of meditation or yoga, wherever it is in Thailand or whatever. They're great for bringing peace to ourselves, and for learning things about ourselves, and for developing, learning to calm ourselves down. Great for that, and I absolutely think those are fantastic. I'm not saying I think they've got huge benefits, and I think it's a great part of a plan for recovery. But by no means do I suggest it as the route to recovery on its own. So often people will think, that's just what I need, I'll do that, and then that will do it. And then they're very disheartened when that doesn't work. It's not as simple as that. We need to expose to fears. We need to move towards unconditional self and life acceptance. We need to understand a bit about how OCD operates in regards to uncertainty, changing our relationship with the thoughts and fears. There's quite a lot that goes into it. You won't do that just on a meditation and yoga course, no matter for how long, how intense, who's teaching you. It makes no difference. And often that's why OCD sufferers feel stuck and alone, because they've gone from one thing to the next, and a friend promises, saying to them, someone at work will say, I've read this meditation book, it's changed my life, I had all this anxiety to work, and they think, great, and then they go and try it themselves, and it doesn't work for their thing. And people get annoyed because they think, well, my friend it worked for. The same as with meds. People often go, well, she was taking such and such med, and it changed her life. Well, it's not as simple as that with OCD. It's a different kind of mechanism, and so just be cautious with those kind of things if you're trying to do that. It's a great help, and don't make me. I'm not making I'm not making a comparison here between meds and that. Meds are a very important part of the journey to recovery, helping taking the edge off. Now, another thing important with that to bear in mind is you often see in forums and on posts on a lot of my things, people say this. They say, well, Rob, don't meds balance out the chemicals in your brain so that you get better and you need that? No, you don't need that. There's no chemical imbalance that needs fixing with meds to get you back to a balance. It's the irrational beliefs and the fears and the way that we're dealing with OCD and intrusive thoughts that create that feeling, that anxious feeling. Now, in regards to what genetically OCD is, that's a different thing that scientists can't pinpoint at the moment. We don't need to know that either, because all we need to know is how to change our irrational beliefs to adopt more rational ones, and to change our relationship with OCD and the intrusive thoughts and so on. And when we do that, that will bring down the anxiety levels. And the meds help take the edge off so that when we're learning things, we've got the energy to function. Because if we're getting completely bombarded, sometimes when it gets really bad, we can't even think, we can't even focus, we haven't got the energy to do anything. So it'll be hard for somebody to learn all the new things that they need to learn to recover from OCD. So that's the purpose of meds being there. Now, in relation to other meds, you have benzodiazepine, which obviously those benzodiazepines will give sort of immediate effect, and so that's why we had a sort of epidemic in addiction to Xanax, diazepam. So you want to be a little bit careful with the likes of those, and use them only in emergencies under your doctor's guidance when you do need them. And you never want to, as desperate as we can get, sometimes we can start thinking, oh, shall I take a small dose long term of Clonopin, Xanax, whatever, for a small dose, and then I can live on that because they read about it on forums or whatever. Well, they're pretty bad stories, those, what actually happens. What happens is people will get addicted. They're very easily addicted because they work so well. They do then wear off. And if you actually follow the stories of those people who've taken a short dose long term, it doesn't end well. And thank God now in the medical system, both in the USA and the UK, for example, we have restrictions on how often those are prescribed because they're very easy to get addicted to, but they serve a purpose because it's very important for people to be aware that, at times of absolute desperation, maybe something horrendous has happened and they really need help, then they've got those for use, and that can be very helpful. But also bearing in mind that when we use those in desperate situations, that can also very easily lead to addiction because we're trying to escape from the worst feelings. So we want to be a bit careful. We won't develop addiction if it's very short term under the doctor's guidance, and we can use those on those occasions, but certainly not as a long-term solution. Okay. Other things that I wanted to talk about that work and don't work. You're not going to find a cure you're not going to get completely fixed by acupuncture. Acupuncture can be very helpful for tight muscles in your neck and your back, which are often turned on by anxiety. And those muscles can tense up, and they'll turn on the same as the ones in the stomach, where you won't be able to relax them yourself off. They just turn on because of the nervous system turning on. So they're not as easy as that. So acupuncture can be very helpful at relieving that. However, acupuncture on its own will not be effective for treatment of OCD as a sort of a long-term solution. It won't do that. These are additional things that can help with symptom relief. However, when you turn the anxiety response down, they will then come down. But with OCD, and especially with generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, you will notice that those muscle groups will turn on, especially in the stomach, leading to acid reflux, tightness, stomach pains, which will lead to diarrhea and stuff because of the tenseness of the stomach and the digestive system. Those will come down as we bring our anxiety down. But things like acupuncture can help with that. The same as massage, which I'm a huge advocate of, and I think it's fantastic in terms of anxiety release, especially with GAD, letting go of control. It's fantastic for that. But just be careful that these aren't adopted as a solution for complete recovery from OCD. So don't sort of go in thinking that's gonna be the only thing I need to get better, because so many things are sold on the basis of this is the only thing. So be very careful of those things, especially when reading online of people who say this is the only method, and it usually is a scroll of text right down to the bottom where they need to make you pay for something. So be very cautious of those. I wasted money on those when I was trying to recover, but actually there were I can think of one example without mentioning any names of a company that I paid money to for an anxiety ebook. that was like that. I'll just trust our method, our sort of principles that you have to follow to get better. And the majority of it was just distraction principles. Now, as bad as that was in terms of how it was just advising distraction as a long-term solution and fixes every type of anxiety, as bad as that was, there was actually some truth in that too, which is short-term distraction is very effective. And actually it's often overlooked, where when you actually incorporate a lot of short-term distraction, as long as you're not trying to run from the fear, but trying to incorporate into your day-to-day life, as we were before we had anxiety, we weren't running around thinking, what do I think now? How do I think? How do I process this? We were involved in the day, and you're distracted. The same as when you're distracted with work or something, you've got very bad anxiety, you notice, I haven't felt anxiety for a while. That's because you're distracted. You're in the zone of doing that thing that you're doing. So I think it's very important to bear in mind short-term distraction has got its benefits, but just don't see it as a long-term solution. Okay, let me just go to some of these questions, then I'll cover some other things. Oh yeah, so that I don't go off track actually. Psychodynamic counselling. You're not going to recover from severe chronic OCD from psychodynamic counselling. Going back and finding out how your mother treated you and all different things, inner child stuff, all of these different things, we don't want to be going there. That is very helpful for an understanding of ourself more and learning a lot about how we think. It's certainly got its purpose. However, you don't want to be trying that for OCD. It's hugely confusing. You're going back and you're analysing things too much, where OCD doesn't need that, and it takes you down a load of dead-end paths, all completely off track. So psychodynamic is not advised. I wasted a lot of time with psychodynamic because I didn't know I had OCD when I first started out. Okay, let's have a look. How do you accept my brain just tries to cancel all my thoughts, muscles kill me? Okay, how do you accept it? Well, accepting is a case of you have to learn about what acceptance means and see how we can digest things in the form of accepting. We can't accept things that we believe are so terrifying they're worse than possibly could be, because that's not sort of digestible by the brain. You need to see it rationally so it becomes digestible like that. And to do that, a great place to start is by the founder of CBT's, one of his great books, which I put as the first book on my reading list, which is How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything by Dr. Albert Ellis. It's a great book, and I chose it by the name to sum up and show people with OCD that it encompasses everything you can think of, because OCD will choose everything and anything. So I think that's a fantastic book that you should look at, and that will give you a much deeper idea and understanding of what acceptance is all about. Do you think forums are a good idea? I quite like them, but I wonder it's holding back. Forums are risky. I spend a lot of time in forums. Forums can sometimes have good information, but I usually advise most people to avoid them because they're full of reassurance. No matter who's moderating them, they always don't moderate them well enough. They've got a hell of a lot of reassurance. It's probably got the same people in it I saw 10, 12 years ago when I was suffering. And the forums are highly risky because they're a negative cycle where people are mainly speaking and doing comparisons of reassurance and speaking in a very negative way. The people who then get better and move, they end up leaving the forum. So you've got no sort of people spreading too much hope, and you've got the ones spreading more negativity. So it's mainly used for reassurance. So I would keep away from those. Let's have a look here. What if we don't know anymore what is the topic of our OCD? Well, if you mean just feeling generally anxious, and you're just anxious all the time, well, we can get into that too. It's looking at what you're anxious about, sort of playing around, seeing what kind of beliefs that we've got there and what things we're frightened of, if we're just viewing the world as an unsafe place, and looking at that and breaking that down. And when we do that and we look at those irrational beliefs and we get into those, it makes a lot of difference. And I think it's very easy to get into that position where we forget which thing is still making us scared, especially with generalized anxiety disorder, where it does that. And I had that too. So it's a case of a little bit of locating it, but mainly learning to see things with a much deeper level of acceptance, seeing things more rationally, treading with more uncertainty, viewing the world as more from a sort of a more positive light of uncertainty of our lives, rather than judging uncertainty as complete negativity, because uncertainty can be many things. A thing can be uncertain and then produce a good result, as well as it can be uncertain and produce a bad result. So there's a mixture, and it's a case of getting used to that. but we'd have to have a look at your particular situation to see what's going on. Okay, let's have a look. I've been trying to work on acceptance, but I feel like I'm so focused on recovery, that's all I think about. Do you recommend taking a break from constantly working on OCD? Absolutely. You know, so much of what fuels OCD is the inner work rate going in on our head, inside our head, treading water at an incredibly fast pace. That is what's fueling so much of anxiety and OCD. People really getting in there and treading at a tremendously fast pace. So we need to cut that work rate down. Mindfulness is good for that, but then people can employ an attitude to mindfulness of work that needs to be done to get better. And that whole chasing becomes a problem. That's why I adopt a sort of a stance of take it for the ride, bring it for the ride, which I teach to all the people that I work with. So I definitely give people periods of breaks and time off when I see them trying to work too hard, so they cut that inner work rate down, because that is a large part that's fueling OCD. What was the name of the book? The name of the book was How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything by the founder of CBT, Dr. Albert Ellis. Had a revelation this weekend. You will never get there or be cured. Brain is constantly changing. It's all about working on your OCD every day. Its degrees of fitness can go up, can go down. Well, you do have to work on it every day. It's not a case of cured. It's a case of, yes, it's there, but you won't notice it's there. So in a position of recovery, you can't tell the difference between if you had it or you didn't. It will raise its head from time to time, but not so often. In little bits it will. Like I often say, like when I go near a cooker, it will sometimes say, you've left it on, the whole house will burn down. But then I know that deeply down I can accept, well, if the house burns down, I've got insurance, so it's not a big issue. And so it turns down. However, the intrusive thoughts, they don't come in much because the brain knows there's no point sending them because they don't really scare him anymore. And also the acceptance he's got, there's no need. He's not going to create that reaction. So it turns down how often they come in and the level of them. So those things do adjust as you go through recovery. But maintenance is essential because it's so easy to slip back and start treading the old patterns that we trod once before that sort of rekindles OCD if we don't watch it. So we have to keep an eye on that and keep it up as the same as like an alcoholic would, but keeping themselves in sobriety throughout their life. They have to go along with their life, and if they slip up, they slip up, and they've got to watch it to make sure they can see it, spotting it coming in and in again. So we do have to watch these things. Let's have a look. It requires maintenance. It sure does. I've had the worst episode of OCD I've ever had. It's been the hardest time of my life. I've been fine for years. I'm starting to wonder if I'll ever get better. Well, everyone thinks that they'll never get better or thinks, how am I ever going to do this? That's a large part of the process that we all go through. And, you know, you're certainly not alone with that one. It certainly does get better, but it takes time for things to adjust and for us to get back on track. But don't focus on the long-term end result. Look at the short term. Look at what we're dealing with right now. Take it one day at a time, the same as with addiction, and see how we go with that. Thanks, Chloe, for sharing the book. The book's called How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything. What are your top tips for harm OCD? I will cover harm OCD in a separate Instagram live. I suffer with OCD and anxiety, struggle on a daily basis where I can't even leave the house or get out of bed. Well, all OCD, you know, you can recover from. I've never seen a case of OCD where the person couldn't recover. Agoraphobia is just a sort of a position that we get to if OCD or anxiety goes on for a very long time and gets into that position where the person then gets stuck. And a long pattern of avoidance then leads to them not being able to leave the house. So that definitely does happen. So we just need to we just need to put in the steps to get ourselves back out and functioning. It doesn't matter how long you've been stuck. It's just a case of doing the work and changing the way that we view things and fears. All right, guys, I'm going to keep it a short Instagram live today. But just as a final note, bear in mind, look, it doesn't matter how long you've had it, doesn't matter how severe it is. OCD recovery is always possible. It's not saying reserved for a few, it's reserved for anyone. Anyone can recover. It's just a case of practice. It's a case of working through things. You know, OCD, anyone can recover from if they do the work. And look at things, but it requires changing a lot of our life philosophies and a lot of the things how we view things and our life perspectives. And so to do that, we need to read quite a bit, and we need to put things in practice, both in behavior work and both in disputing our rational beliefs. And that gets in there, and that will lift it. I've never had a case of anyone who's come to me that I've not been able to. I've not got a straight away a plan of how to get them better. It's never complicated. It's just a case of doing it and finding the easiest way to get them to understand it. And I think that's the importance of awareness today, is just getting that out more and more so that people see how OCD recovery is a possibility. It's not something that is impossible, as I thought, and so many did up until recent sort of decades, because there wasn't the good evidence and good therapy and information available to hand to get people better. So like the likes of Howard Hughes, who was a billionaire, one of the wealthiest men in the world at the time, who suffered hugely because of OCD, because he couldn't recover, because his OCD had taken and consumed his whole life, and they didn't have the treatment then. So you've always got to think of that, or think about the people in the past who were in the medieval times, where they were probably burnt at the stake or locked up in an asylum for the rest of their life because they thought they were possessed by a devil. When they said, "I think this," or "I fear this," or "I might be a this," certainly wasn't looked upon like it is today. So, however bad you think it is today, it's nowhere near as bad as then. Let's have a look here. Had OCD for 34 years, just started to meditate. It's helping. Yeah, meditation is a very, very good thing. It's a very important part of the journey, but it's not the whole total journey. Far too often, social media accounts, online accounts, on the internet, there's many articles that people write, make it too simplistic. Like you can just meditate and mindfully leave OCD and it's gone. Well, it's not gonna work like that. It's not a case of just viewing thoughts as thoughts when the person is consumed by the thought being reality and completely locked onto that, and OCD is locked onto that, and they're utterly convinced that they have done this thing or are this thing. It's not going to release as easy as that, and I can assure you. And if anything, that leads to people being disheartened, because people go from therapist to therapist being told all day long, "Oh, just live with uncertainty, just leave the thoughts there." And all right, in a lot of time they're not doing that, and that is fueling a lot of it. But in a lot of other times, it certainly wouldn't release. For me, it wouldn't release. When I had harm OCD and false memories relating to the past, it stayed locked on until I got to a position of deeply understanding, believing, and feeling unconditional self-acceptance, which got right under it. I wouldn't write myself off for some condition that OCD can put on, because OCD is like a homing missile. It's looking for anything in our thinking that can sabotage us in terms of a belief. So if we say, "Oh, I'm in a great relationship, I'm in love with my partner or my wife," it will go, "What if you cheated? What if you did this?" It's looking to attack. So it's through acceptance that we get under it. And when we do that and see things rationally, by seeing things for what they are in reality, it gets OCD's hook and unlocks it. But OCD's hook wouldn't unlock for me on harm OCD. It was like, "No, can't take that risk. You did that in the past. You're unforgivable." Endless guilt, endless anxiety. So I was living in that cycle all the time. Endless guilt, endless anxiety, every second of every day. And that's very tough, and as you guys know who've got that. So we have to work through it bit by bit, and changing our beliefs and our life philosophies to adopt more rational, evidence-based beliefs that do not fuel that anxiety cycle. And as I did that, then the guilt went and everything went, and I got relief. It was suddenly very empowering, and also suddenly quite daunting for me, because I suddenly realised, shit, I've lost loads of years to this disorder, and I've been ill for a very long time, and there was no other way around it. So when I finally got round it, I made it my life's work, 24/7 mission to raise awareness of OCD and make sure that people understand how to recover and what works, all the myths and the nonsense that we hear, what works and what isn't working, and so that we shine a light on that all the time, because that's how we're going to improve the world of OCD. In 10 to 20 years, I'm sure the world will be in a very different place. And the world's been in darkness about OCD for far too long. So that's what drives me constantly to bring it back out of the dark. Not back out, it's never been out. So it's just got to get out of the dark in the first place. And the likes of Dr. Albert Ellis, who's been incredible in changing OCD and all emotional suffering through his great methods, which are branched off of Greek and Roman philosophy, which has been around for a long time, but packaging it in a way that delivers effective results for different mental health disorders and emotional suffering. The likes of Dr. Claire Weeks, who was a pioneer in anxiety at the time, fantastic in terms of what she did for anxiety. I'm a great fan of hers and include her stuff regularly on my reading list. Dr. Viktor Frankl invented logotherapy, Austrian psychiatrist who was in a concentration camp, lost many of his family members, talking about taking great meaning from times of great adversity and suffering. Dr. Frankl is another one on my reading list with his book Man's Search for Meaning. Hugely one of the most amazing pioneers for suicide prevention, and hugely effective at the points of the OCD recovery journey where I got to, and when I get many people to that point where they suddenly feel back as they did without the suffering of OCD, and they suddenly realize, shit, I've lost years to OCD. That's suddenly, as it was for me, a very scary moment, because I thought I'd done it to myself, and I was very sort of depressed about that. So finding great meaning from those years and taking the meaning, which for me was I wanted to take it from that and go and help others so that I could get back and create great meaning. Had I never been through that experience, I would never have the energy, the passion, that sort of being empowered by that to then help others and change things. So I needed that to then get to that next level. And so I think that was very, very important. So if you look at those guys, for example, they've got a very, very broad knowledge on emotional suffering and how to improve people's conditions. And I think we're so lucky to live at a time where they were. Whereas if you start going back and we go to medieval times, they didn't have this knowledge. So it's very, very different. So yeah, that's on my reading list. Those are some of the main people that I focus on and have done for many years when helping people to recover from emotional suffering. And I think make sure you get those books covered, because they're real game changers. Don't skim them, don't scan them, read through them. Don't just get an audio book on YouTube and listen to it briefly. You want to thoroughly read it. I read those books a few times over so you could really see what the message was. You could really see what it was all about. And I think that's really important. Could you please list the best and most helpful books for OCD recovery? I've often said that I'm not a fan of many books that mention the word OCD in the title, because I've never seen too many great ones of that. And I'm currently working on a book that's going to be really packed with all the information I've had over the years on how to get people recovered from OCD, and all the things that I think I like and the things I don't like and the things that work and don't work, and really in detail to OCD, which I do think is going to be a game changer for OCD, and that will have OCD in the title. But for far too long, too many OCD books go completely off tangent and lead to dead-end roads. There are some good ones, but so many of them really leave people stuck. I'm not going to mention some of the bad ones, which were ones that I'd read many times over and were stuck on for years, because there are some ones that get recommended often that are very bad and do not lead to recovery and then leave people feeling very hopeless. But I'm going to concentrate on the ones that are very helpful. Now, the ones that are very helpful on my reading list in order are: 1, How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable by Dr. Albert Ellis. Number 2, The Myth of Self-Esteem by Dr. Albert Ellis. Number 3, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Number 4 on that reading list is Claire Weekes' book. I've just forgotten the name of the title because she's got a couple of different books. Let me just have a look 1 second.